Lots of goodies expected in today's Ontario budget, but on the horizon, what kind of spending cuts and pain awaits Ontario? We look at the promise that could haunt Ontario Liberals. Also, step right up, the contenders to lead Ontario Tories. I'm Affan Chowdhry. Welcome to Globe Now. If the Ontario budget sounds and looks familiar, well, it is. In fact, it is exactly the same budget that triggered last month's Ontario election. Here to talk about the spending plans of the Liberal government is Globe columnist Adam Radwanski. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you.
What is the message Kathleen Wynne is sending with this budget?
Well, I guess it's twofold. One is that she's making good on what she promised she was going to run on, so you can trust her. I mean, she pretty much had to deliver the same budget because that's what she said she was going to do during the campaign. In terms of what this budget, the message the budget itself delivers, this was at least an ostensibly left-of-center budget. It was very much aimed at either trying to get the NDP support to avoid that election, or if not, then allowing the Liberals to compete for support with the NDP. It worked reasonably well at that. But it's a way of saying, as the Premier said consistently during the campaign, that she wants to build Ontario up.
Right.
That was her line. That was a way that she tried to get NDP supporters over to her side. And this budget still delivers the same message, despite the fact that we're now in a post-election period.
And to some extent, it's also rubbing salt in the wounds of the NDP because they're the ones who triggered the election.
It does a little bit. And now the NDP is trying to say that it's, the budget sort of a wolf in sheep's clothing, or a Trojan horse budget, they call it. Unfortunately for them, they didn't really make that argument that much during the campaign, although they could have, because if you look in there actually is a lot of steps to suggest that there's cuts coming in the future. The NDP didn't do much to highlight that during the actual campaign.
Any curveballs that we can expect in this budget?
I don't expect a lot right now. I think the curveball is what happens in the next few months when they try to implement more on the savings side.
Okay, a good news budget, but presumably there might be some pain down the road for Ontarians. What could that be?
Well, I think a fair amount. I mean, if you look at the budget, they're talking about still balancing the books by 2017-18, despite the deficit actually going up this year a little bit. So there's really a backloaded plan to do that. They've been pretty ambiguous as to what that means, but I think it could mean a few things. I mean, one is we're probably heading into some fights with unions again to try to not have wages go up at all. Another would be they're going to try to downsize some ministries. I think they're going to be shifting some resources around. We're probably looking at some degree of asset sales or privatization in the next few years. So there's a lot coming, but it's very vague right now as to what it actually means.
So we're expecting labor strife with teachers, public sector
Yeah,
workers?
I think everybody. Yeah. I think teachers would be the first one.
Right.
They're up this year. Doctors are also up this year, but they're a little bit less fraught for the Liberals. But with time, I think you'll see everybody. And as last time to a point, and under Dalton McGuinty, the teachers kind of set the pace as well. I mean, there's a lot of workers there. There are people with whom the Liberals are reasonably close, and there's some room there for probably finding some savings. So I'd expect them to try to really be the first big test for the Liberals on this.
Now, Kathleen Wynne did a lot to win over Ontarians. I mean, do you think she has set too high expectations?
I don't know how high they are in the sense that I think a lot of people voted against Tim Hudak and the Progressive Conservatives, or maybe they liked Kathleen Wynne. I don't know how much it was her platform exactly. That being said, no question she campaigned from center left, not really in keeping with what her actual agenda is probably going to have to be in the couple of years that follow this. So I think they are a little high. I think what the Liberals are going to hope here is that as they go through more of an austerity period, there's enough in this budget here, a new pension plan, new infrastructure spending, new social spending, and so on, that just implementing that over the next few years will allow them to still say they're building Ontario up, as she put it.
But the promise of balancing the budget within 3 years is something that they might come to regret?
Oh, I think politically they might very well regret it, and they might regret if they can't do it. They still seem to think they can.
Right, okay.
A lot of other people are skeptical.
Thank you so much, Adam. Well, we want to hear from you. Do you think the Ontario government can balance the books in 3 years? And what concerns, if any, do you have about cuts in the future? Tweet us at Globe Now. So, as the Ontario Liberals showcase their budget, you can expect a lot of strong criticism from across the benches. But Ontario political parties are doing a bit of soul-searching, and one party is searching for a leader. The Globe's Adrian Morrow takes a look at the contenders who could one day lead the Progressive Conservative Party.
The Progressive Conservative leadership is most likely going to be a crowded race. Of course, the only declared candidate is Christine Elliott, but there are at least 6 or 7 others who are contemplating bid. Vic Fideli, Lisa MacLeod, Monte McNaughton, Rod Phillips, Patrick Brown, and Rick Dykstra. So Christine Elliott is the PC's deputy leader and health critic, the wife of former federal finance minister Jim Flaherty, and she's somebody who's basically trying to stake out the middle ground in the party, trying to kind of portray herself as someone who's very different from Tim Hudak. Christine's biggest weakness is that she's not an attack dog, she's not her style, which is something that I think that the PCs would certainly like to put in the window as someone who's running for premier, but for someone who has to lead the opposition for 4 years before then could be a little bit of a liability. Vic Fideli's affable, charming former mayor of North Bay, Ontario, and the PC finance critic. He's someone who's definitely a hard worker and tries to put a lot of thought into crafting policy and into the way that he sort of goes after the government on some of the financial stuff. His disadvantage is that he doesn't have the sort of networks in the party that Christine Elliott does. The best thing about Lisa MacLeod is that she's brash and outspoken. And the worst thing about Lisa MacLeod is that she's brash and outspoken. She was very much Tim Hudak's chief attack dog. The fact that she's very good at holding the government to account and getting under the premier's skin gives her a very high profile within the party. Conversely, though, this is a party that needs to buff the rough edges off the party's message and needs to kind of soften its image a little bit. So Monty McNaughton is young, fresh-faced, very earnest kind of guy. His downside is that he's basically Tim Hudak 2.0. Rod Phillips has a lot of business connections and certainly is a big player in the Toronto establishment. The downside is that when he was at the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation, he played a part in trying to implement the strategy to get rid of the subsidies to the horse racing industry, which is something that could play very poorly among the rural base for the Tory party. Patrick Bown and Rick Dykstra are both federal MPs. They both sort of have the same difficulty, which is a relatively low name recognition compared to the other potential contenders in the race. Christine Elliott is definitely going to be the front runner.
Well, that's it for today's show. If you've got a moment, hop onto Twitter and let us know what you think. Which of the politicians that Adrian mentioned do you think would make a strong leader of the Ontario Tories? Tweet us at Globe Now. I'm Affan Chowdhry. Thanks for watching.